Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Andrew here with another episode of In Good Company. Today, we're sitting here with Brandon. Brandon, thanks, man, for joining us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Brandon is kind of is going to be our first guest that's really not kind of just here for a very specific company. I've known Brandon for years, seeing your evolution as an entrepreneur and all the different things you're going through. Really happy to sit down and talk with you today.
Absolutely, glad to be here, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Glad you could carve out some time for us.
Yeah, it was a good time. It's kind of a midweek, so we were able to make some time.
Nice, man. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and one of the things we try to focus in Good Company, is just kind of growth and development as entrepreneurs. People like developing brands and things like that. So how did you kind of get your start in your path?
Yeah. I think for me, I started off obviously very traditional as a young person, as a young guy, where you're trying to figure out kind of your path. And I started off in software consulting, went to school for that. My original major was broadcast journalism. And, I look back and I think sometimes as a young person where you're trying to figure out your opportunities, you base it off of how much money you can make.
Right.
And that's not always the best way to do it, because there's long-term opportunities and long-term money if you go a certain path. And so, I went the traditional route and did software consulting for a while and started a family young. And I think obviously that, drives a lot of decisions when you have kids and all those other responsibilities. And then I think when you work your way up in the corporate ladder, I guess, if you will, to a certain extent, and I had leadership roles, and I think I figured, I don't know if this is really for me, right? And then when you forge relationships, even with, the executives at companies, you're like, wow, they're not really working all that hard. Like, I like that, you know what I mean? Like, but also too, understanding the relationship to money and opportunities. So I think, as my kids got older and understanding money more and understanding taxes more and understanding stagnant income versus residual income, it took me some time, to really come to grips with that, because I think that money's or even, careers is sometimes an emotional thing. Right. You're influenced by, mentors or families or parents or things of that nature. And I think one thing I've learned over even the last 3 or 4 years with the pandemic is nothing stays the same. Right.
Right.
I've always had very candid conversations with my grandfather, and he tells me, I bought my first house when however old he was, and it was $28,000, and I'm like, sir, you know what I mean? Like a Honda is $28,000 today. So
if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky, right? So I think that was probably more the subtle thing. It wasn't necessarily like a business or a trade or anything. It was just, really looking at the time and energy that I put into every single day, and what was actually coming back.
Nice. That's something we see a lot of in the world of entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Right? Is looking and examining kind of your surroundings, your influences kind of around you. I know your grandfather. That hard work ethic. Yeah. I mean, that man could and would outwork anybody.
and it's tough sometimes to combat that ideology if you've been really successful at it. My grandfather worked, we had a restaurant in Chicago. He worked construction, he shoveled snow, and he was able to provide for, and take care very well of a family. And so, I think that's a lot of people have to dig deep into, what their purpose is and why it is. And sometimes us men have, those issues figuring out because, we're supposed to take care of a family. We're supposed to be a husband and provide. And sometimes you get going in that race. But, I have 3 teenage daughters, or they're now 3 teenage daughters. So like, I pump the brakes, like, what in the world is happening right now? Like, what are the opportunities that I can create for them? Right. Because things are just different. And I had conversations with my grandfather, about that. And his mindset wasn't necessarily that. It was keeping food on the table or keeping, status quo. And so my mindset has changed towards business opportunities, since then because of that. And it's, what can I create that will expose them to opportunities? It may not be what they want to do, but here's an opportunity to create ownership or equity or experience that is maybe not necessarily captured in traditional higher education.
Right. And that's one of the things that I've always really liked is examining where those other opportunities can be, right? Before it was work 3 different jobs, there's 24 hours in a day. Well, I only need to sleep 4 of them, but how can we work smarter, not harder, especially in this day and age where there's so many opportunities from content creation on multiple platforms. I mean, I know media is something that you're big into. Sure. We think 10, 15 years ago, media was your network television, exactly. A few premium cable channels.
Exactly.
Now, every place has an opportunity to highlight media and content.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that business is media and media is business. Obviously everything that drives content these days are businesses, from ads and sponsors. Those are the people who are buying up. I think we're so subconsciously inundated by what's happening with these different companies, but we don't really think that it's being marketed, right? Like I say, I'm going to go to the SoFi Stadium,
right,
to watch the Rams game,
right?
Then I'm like, what does SoFi actually do? Like they're a financial company, or we say, back in the day here, we used to say Bank One Ballpark or Chase Center or the Footprint Center where the Suns play right now, right? Or University of Phoenix Stadium, right? So I think that when you think of media and content and business, they go, so hand in hand. And I think the biggest thing is just your environment, right? So I was around, I've always had friends that, either were athletes or part of professional sports. And as I got more ingrained being around that industry, I know some folks, and I do think that there is a seismic probably injustice versus how much teachers are paid versus how much entertainers and so on and so forth are paid. But those industries are supported by advertisers. Those industries are supported by the fans that go out there, every weekend. So we can get upset at, LeBron James because he makes X amount of money, but, some people know who Jeannie Buss is, but most people don't know who the owners are of these teams anyway, who are making hundreds and hundreds of millions behind the scenes. So I think once you get a true understanding of like how the world works, I guess from big business, you can carve out a niche of, your opportunities. So that's what I've always tried to do, and it's taken a long time. Honestly, I don't know what that even means. I guess
right.
I think so. Like a long time, but it's like I don't know in my head. I don't know why I thought something would be different, but understanding the behind the scenes and then really being like, ooh, okay, here's where I fit, and it's because here's where I fit based upon my skill sets, based upon my experience, not because it's either the new trend or so on and so forth. So that's why for me, I've been around, sports and entertainment the last 5 or 6 years. Good family friends of mine have played baseball forever at this particular point, and one of my good friends obviously does TV for the Dodgers. But being around that environment, I've seen just, TV and media makes money.
Right.
Content makes money, and not content for business, but content as a business. I think is really the wave of the future, because we've moved so far away from radio and TV and newspapers. Now everything is on demand, and people want to see it when they want to see it and see who they want to see.
Right.
Not Ted Koppel or Bryant Gumbel on Sunday nights. It's like, okay, well, you're forcing us to see this particular person, and I don't really have a choice. Back in the day, you may have had 8 or 9 choices for who tells you your news.
Right.
Now it's 18 different methods from.
And depending on what you want to consume.
Right. Right. And then people understand, like, oh, this particular news outlet curtails to this or curtails to that. So I think there's opportunity where people that are our age, and younger, that are looking for more information unfiltered from some sort of bias, which who knows if that's a real thing.
Right. And it's interesting to talk about that as your journey, from software development, having kids and all of that. What's kind of excites you with, having daughters that are now teenagers that you see, in them? What kind of gets you excited to motivate them?
The craziest thing is I'm an only child, right? And I've obviously never been a teenage girl. So it's like, I think when you and I grew up, like, I liked, basketball, Michael Jordan, sneakers. Like, it was like pretty, like there was like 4 or 5 things that you could get a teenage dude with, right? Like, there was like some hot girl, sports, whatever was going on, basketball cards. Like, I think now there's so much more influence in having girls and like seeing the stuff they like. I'm like, what? How do you even like that? But it's like they're thoroughly enthralled. Like, my kids are gonna hate me when they see this, but I could care less. So whatever. My girls are, really excited about, Korean culture and K-pop music and stuff. And I'm like, yo, they're literally doing like all the old songs from the early 2000s, like literally verbatim. Right. But they're doing it in their culture. But it's really accepting that that's what this generation's into. and even being around different companies, and I've invested in different companies, equity stakes and stuff, and like I tell my girls, like, you guys are the target demographic for most of products and services. Girls aged from 15 to 22, like, they're either going to convince their mom and dad or me to buy them stuff, and I'm like, no. And then I'm like, yeah, that is me. Right. I took them to the SoFi Stadium, right, in LA, this $1 billion stadium, to see, one of the biggest K-pop bands, and paid an unnecessary amount of money, right? And there was 60,000. And in my head, I'm like, okay, it's going to be a bunch of teenage screaming girls. Not at all. Like, there's maybe half teenage screaming girls, but there's like 40, 50-year-old women there. But honestly, like, I literally fell asleep for 25 minutes at this concert because it was just so not interesting to me. Right. But there's 60,000 screaming kids, and this particular brand brought out Meg Thee Stallion and did a Coldplay song, and I like woke up for that, and I was like, what in the world?
What is happening around
But kids
me?
were camped out, getting the merch, lined up. They did 2 shows, like a Saturday, Sunday, and a Thursday, Friday, and I just sat back and marveled at the business of it.
Right.
And I was just like, if you manufacture the right product or content, they don't have to be talented. I think that's where I would at with my kids. I'm like, these kids are not even like that talented. Like, it's 8 or 9 kids, not even kids. They're aged from, 16 to 30. Most of them can't really speak English that well, and they're doing traditional American pop culture songs, but like, everyone loves them. So I think seeing more stuff like that, like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be like really that great of a product, but it's really how you package and market these things is what drives content, sales, and everything these days. So I definitely don't want to start a Korean K-pop band by any means, but that unlocks to like, you don't want
to be what was the guy, Lou Pearlman? You don't want to be the Lou Pearlman of K-pop?
We're not taking advantage of, Backstreet Boys or whoever they were, NSYNC, but...
It was like all of them. I think that dude created like every boy band.
I saw that too, or no different than, what's the old boy from, with Straight Outta Compton, whatever that guy too, Jerry Heller. Jerry Heller. But as I've seen that, and I spend time, I spend probably half of my time in LA, I'm like, what you're doing is not really that special. Like, to me, that's how I feel. But it's like really just how it's packaged and how it's marketed. Yeah. So I think that's what I've really looked for, for my next couple of years. Not obviously dumbing down the product or services, but I'm like, I really have, access and opportunity to some really great content or some really great stories.
Nice.
And how could I take maybe that same marketing and packaging formula and then push that forward with content as a business.
Nice. So as you look down and, you're looking at, we're at the beginning of 2023. Yeah. This will probably air, right, Steve? Like middle of February, probably, somewhere around there. What kind of excites you about 2023 and your business goals? Like, what are you really excited about?
So I think right now, whenever this airs, but right now we're the week before the Waste Management Open, we're the week before the Super Bowl. Being in certain environments, I'll just say that. I think sometimes we, as a society, sometimes we dehumanize people or things, people that are well known or people that their salaries are known. So my main focus is really telling these stories from folks that are known as public figures, that have gone through problems that most normal people go through, but they also get completely slandered for it. I'll use Kyrie Irving as an example.
Right.
Kyrie, we're working on you. But Kai has a great story, someone who makes mistakes, and Kai's probably 31, maybe, something like that. And so the expectation that we put on these different influencers, entertainers, or athletes when they sign a contract that they're quote unquote professional, when they have bad days just like we do, we dehumanize them when they make, absolute mistakes, in the cancel culture. And so I think that there's an opportunity to show these folks as normal, actual human people, regardless of what their salaries are, regardless of what their access is. So that's like a big focus for what I would say our MO is in creating this content.
Nice.
There's folks that are, timid or shy to be able to share their story. But I think that once you understand that the next version of you is coming behind you, there's an opportunity potentially to give back, to offer some type of preparedness for that. So that's really what we're focusing on for the first quarter is really gathering, real good content that we can be able to share stories that maybe folks don't know necessarily in depth, or maybe potentially debunk, a commonly thought something or the other about a group of people or a story. So
nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, again, I truly believe we live in a golden age of storytelling. Yeah. Right. And I think because people are so excited for content,
for sure,
right, and we consume it on. Why is TikTok and Instagram outpacing Facebook in growth? It's videos.
Absolutely.
Right? 30-second now, 2-minute long videos.
Absolutely.
have a deep impact on people. Yeah. And so I think that's really cool. Kind of, how do you tell these stories from a different perspective?
Yeah.
How do we highlight the fact that, again, using the Kyrie Irving thing, think of how you were at 30.
Yeah.
And I think that, I'm just going to be turning 40.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that who I was 30 is night and day difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And humanizing those aspects of it is really an important thing that I think people miss today.
Yeah, and I say that, about Kai and even about Kanye and other folks, right? I think that documentary on Kanye came out, Cootie and Chike did that. It's, years and years of just a regular camera capturing that content, and that, what was it, like a $30 million deal with Netflix. I think we've all known Kanye for years, right? And we think we have a perspective of Kanye because of the works of art he puts out, or his crazy rants, or his rants, however you want to call them, right? But I think you saw a different side of him in that actual documentary that was done on Netflix that gave you more insight to, like, why people are the way that they are. So I'm not pacifying and saying that either his behavior is right or wrong. That's not the idea of the content. And the same thing with Kyrie, right? I think that, there's a big business side of it too, right? So, Kyrie is no longer a Nike athlete, right? He has, if not one of the top selling basketball shoes in the country, and he's in the middle of a season, right, and he's trying to find a new shoe manufacturer, right? That's interesting, right? From an athlete, that's your lunch pail, that's your work, like your actual apparel that you're wearing. People may not think that's that big of a deal, but there's struggle in that. So I think there's, a human side that you see, these folks that go through certain stuff that we're looking to be able to capture. We're looking, and honestly, some of the stuff we don't know what we don't know. This might be a time capsule piece that gets released, like, the Kanye piece in 5 years or something like that. But there's some time-sensitive stuff, obviously, around the Super Bowl that's happening that we're looking to put together. Obviously, around basketball season, baseball season starts up here soon. That's really a big focus of ours. There's so many, young people. I think this would be beneficial for.
That's awesome.
So,
it's such a cool thing to see. Your progression. From software sales to this,
sure.
And on behalf of true Dodger Nation, we welcome you.
Yeah, right. Blue Gang.
It's affirmed now. It's nice to see more people coming into the fold.
Yeah.
And so I will always say as a Dodger fan since birth.
Sure. Yeah. And to that point though, right? I think that, like, folks who are diehard, like, there is Raider fans, like Dodger fans.
Why are you picking on me?
Cowboy fans.
Okay, that's it.
Right? Like, sometimes we're like, why are you what? The Cowboys haven't won, or the Raiders? But, like, there's like a real dichotomy to, like, the families, right. Or, when you go to Dodger Stadium, it's, half seasonal fans or whatever type, fly-by-night fans. But then there's, like, when the Dodgers won the World Series in 2020, it was obviously during the little bubble or whatever it was called. Like, I would go to the store and the grandmothers would still be crying that the Dodgers won.
100%.
Because, their husbands were waiting since 80 whatever, and 88, and being around those guys, and mention, one of my buddies does TV for the team, and then he does TV with Oral Hershiser, and just the whole, there's fans that have really been waiting their whole lives for the Dodgers to get back to that.
I can literally tell you.
Yeah.
My wife looked at me. There were 3 things that my wife looked at me completely different on. Vin Scully retiring, bald like a baby, sitting in my chair, watching his final game.
Right.
Kobe retiring.
Right.
And the Dodgers winning the World Series.
Yeah.
Legitimately, she looked at me and was like, who are you?
Yeah.
And it is a weird thing, especially like in the LA culture.
Absolutely.
The Dodgers are ingrained
Absolutely.
in the culture of LA.
Yeah.
and and stemming back to the O'Malley family coming in and flattening the mountains, it's a crazy, indoctrination
from inception. Inception.
Mm-hmm.
So I was at Vince Scully's last game. I went to one of Kobe's last games, and the All-Star game was this year in LA, and I was there for that. And it's one of those weird, surreal feelings where you feel like you're in a movie. It was actually Miss Robinson's 90-something birthday, the day of the
All-Star game.
And so Denzel Washington came out and spoke, and her family was there, and everyone was there. Magic was there, and this, so it's one of those things where I love that aspect of it because it brings so many folks together. It brings so many folks together. It doesn't matter any type of race or anything like that. But you're right. The Dodgers have such a storied history, obviously, with Jackie Robinson and O'Malley family, and then on later on. And so that's something that, is a goal for ours. I think there's been some stories that have been done in books that have been done about, those different LA teams that you've seen made into motion films or TV. And that's also a goal of ours to look into.
Nice.
Because there's some stories that we're just so closely, to that, no one else could really tell. The Lakers have that show on Showtime, or there's a show about the Lakers.
There's a show about the Lakers.
There's a show about the Lakers called Showtime. That's from a book. And then I know that folks from the Lakers organization did one, and then Magic did one as well. Nothing's really been done on the Dodgers with that.
It's something I've always thought about because, from the Hispanic side,
sure,
there is it's always something. This goes off on a weird tangent thing, but the story of just how the Dodgers came to LA,
right,
and the displacement of hundreds of families that had lived in that valley where they built the stadium. I always found it fascinating how that happened to our culture, yet the Hispanics are the largest representing group that roots for the Dodgers.
Sure.
And it was, you see that, in other things where people may have been displaced and they have a hatred towards the team.
Sure.
There is this entirely different flip where it's nothing will get anybody together more than a Dodger game.
It is. And if you've seen, like I said, I've had just the fortunate opportunity to be around the team and the organization through the homies, and being able to see Don Newcomb and Tommy and Manny Minoso and all these other guys that have been around, Sandy Koufax, and just like seeing these guys, Fernando Valenzuela. Like Fernando Valenzuela, it might as well be the mayor,
100%.
Like, and that wasn't my time period, right? So I never saw any of these guys actually play, but seeing them and seeing how fans react to them is absolutely out of control. And random plug, it doesn't matter because the Dodgers Fan Fest is this Saturday. But I typically will go to that, and just it's an awe to see, but also too, like when I see that stuff, I come back to this is a business, So that's what I say, when you're talking about businesses and really branding and that marketing, it doesn't matter who the Dodgers put out there, honestly. Like, these guys are going to support and ride for these guys, and guys come from different cultures. I look at like Hyunjin Ryu, and he was with the team, like the large Asian community, and even right now with the teenager, he's not even a teenager anymore, but Julio, and so I think there's so many stories within these stories that I'll be able to tell, and I'm like, it's time now to look in and to dig into some of these stories that maybe people don't know that much.
Right.
People can really dig into and will have an affinity to, because they can sit down and watch it with their whole family.
Right.
So
Yeah, my son could literally choose anything in his life except he has to be a Dodger fan, he has to be a Laker fan. Those are the only absolutes in his world.
Right, or he just can't be a Giants fan, right? You can't be a Giants fan, or you can't be a Celtics fan.
We don't celebrate Halloween because it's orange and black.
Right. But yeah, no, I think that and I think the landscape of even TV and media has completely changed when you see so many different companies that are in distribution these days, and because I've seen like, Amazon is giving so many first look deals to artists and influencers, or even the shift of how Netflix and some of those folks have worked out. Early on, one of my business partners, we negotiated a deal to try to do something with Larry King. This is in 2015. And it was probably way too soon, but He was great. We partnered with a production company and a good buddy of mine. We were going to do like a daily variety show where he already does TV for the Dodgers, but it was going to be kind of like a Kelly and Michael or Good Morning, but it was going to be more sports centric, and we had a female host that came, and how easy that deal came together was like mind-boggling to me, because at the time, and I'm nobody, but I was just like, how is Larry King,
right,
you know, offering up his studios in Burbank and offering up to be the first host? But there's obviously a business deal behind it, and that deal didn't necessarily end up the way that we wanted to, but it was a learning experience of, hey, here's how on-demand works, here's how Netflix and Hulu works, here's what is necessary behind the scenes to be able to have, you know, an advertising partner kind of already set and defined. And even that's kind of changed since 2015, I think that was. But to see how, I don't want to say how easy that was, but I thought it was going to be much harder. Learned so much from that experience that it isn't necessarily like who you know necessarily. It's good people, hard workers with a good body of work or a good concept.
Right, and finding the right story, right?
Yeah.
The right thing that grabs people. So one of the last questions is, being that media content is your world, have you explained to your daughters yet that Netflix used to be a mail order DVD setup?
Yeah, they remember the real little box thing we used to go through, and like the screen used to always be like discolored from the sun or something crazy like that. I was like, yeah, that was like Netflix and Redbox that were out there, and then like if you returned it late, it was like a fee. And
I explained that to one of my nephews. I was like, literally, you would go online, put in your submissions, and it would be in your queue, and you just get these random DVDs sent to you in the mail.
Yeah, and one of my girls the other day was like, well, what did you actually put it into? Like, what did you watch? And I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah, there's these things called DVD players that like no one has or uses anymore, but like, wait, what? You're like, could you pause it or fast forward? I was like, stop, child. My girls are dumb now. They're like, back in the olden days. I was like, oh, okay, you mean pre-internet? But I think about it, I was like, this is true.
Yeah.
It's like that Google Maps, I used to have like 2 pages of maps and like have to do all this other stuff. I'm like, it seems so different. But all of that to me, and that's like, it seems like that was so long ago, but that was like 20 some odd years ago. Like, what is the next 20 years going to be?
Still, when people say 30 years ago, I'm like, oh, like in the 70s?
70s, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
so,
now they're just like, no.
Yeah.
The year I started high school was 30.
Right.
That's crazy. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out with us, man.
Appreciate it.
Excited to see the content you guys are creating and what's going to come out in the next year or so. So again, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Definitely.
Everybody, please like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all the socials. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, whatever the kids say these days. And we're out. Thanks, Steve.